Okay, buddy, we're on. So, um, the thanks for taking the time. The reason why I'm reaching out is just a little bit rattled about the model context protocol that's come out from Anthropic, um, and how that affects naps or the utility of naps. Um, so I'm just I don't know. Are you did you get a chance to school up on what the MCP was about?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I watched the video. I read the docs a bit. I came up with a little thought experiment to help you.
Okay, great.
Okay, so what if you were to just implement MCP as another interface into your own system?
That seemed like a necessary thing.
Right.
Anyway,
So, why I think that would actually help you, why it would like make you feel less shook about what you're doing, is because it's going to, when you do that, it's going to show you the hard line between like all the other stuff that you've built and like what this thing is meant for, right? So, like from what I can see of it, it looked like it's a fairly agnostic tool, right? It needs a backend. It's basically providing a front end to the LLM, and you write a server as a backend, right?
yep.
So if you were to just implement that server, I think you would pretty quickly see like what parts of what you've built already are not included in MCP. Like what they built there is a pretty thin thing, in my opinion. It's just basically
Right, but um, like I can see how you could easily wrap the naps interface with MCP, and then you're like, ta-da! Every nap is now MCP compatible, and
Mhm.
then, trivially, you could also make naps call MCP servers where other people were building MCP based services and all that. Uh,
Yeah.
I suppose that like building naps and promoting naps is a lot of work, and I'm just wondering if that might be like MCP's close enough that it might not be worth the heartache to build, because naps is basically the evolution of covenants or how to package
Yeah.
code, right? and
Yeah.
and and I'm like, well, if MCP kind of allows you to be really shitty with your packaging, or do it any way you like, and then present a nice clean interface that achieves the same. I'm like, well, maybe that's enough. And then I'm like, well, what's the thing that we're doing? I guess because I've got a lot of things that I know are cool sitting around, but independently they're not that much cooler. And so the painful question is, the thing we want is the Dreamcatcher. Maybe we should just build it cobbled together out of bastardized pieces, because building it purely is a little bit of a slog. Um,
I can see that. Uh, I do think that the introduction of something like MCP. By the way, I think was it the spinning head thing in Tron called the MCP? It's like a cheeky name. Yeah, you know the thing I'm talking about. Have you ever seen the movie Tron?
yep.
The bad guy in that movie is called the Master Control Program, and it's a big spinning head that yells at everyone.
Oh,
So
that's
and
funny. No, I didn't.
so
I
I
don't
so I
remember
think these
that.
guys were being a little bit jokey with that name,
Right.
right? But anyway, they're going to bring a rush of people into like let's connect everything possible
Yeah.
into LLMs, right?
Right.
And like that's the thing that's got you feeling a little bit nervous is like you were obviously hoping for like people to do that in
Uh,
like in naps, right?
yeah. Yeah. But uh, that's sort of not what I meant by that. Like, wanting it to be through us is not a healthy thing to want. Like wanting it to happen at all, great. Wanting
Yes.
to be in the game when it happens, yep, that's cool. I guess like defeat for us is when something lands that's close enough to the utility that people would get from us that we are now worthless because the incremental change is not worth the risk to switch. Um, Plus, if someone's way more funded, way more advanced, and has an insertion point with several million customers already, like that's just a waste of time. Um, so I guess the question I have is a bit deeper, and it's not very well formed. I'm just sort of left like because we've also found that there's a number of in the recent months a number of decentralized compute platforms like V0 or Aleph Zero. There's a few others around that are able to run AI agents as in a decentralized fashion on a blockchain. So I'm like, well, that's not you know everyone knew that that was possible.
Yeah.
We had one way of doing it, and I guess I'm losing the shine as to why our architecture using this the the design goals of our architecture seem eroded now. Like there's lots of close enough things. They ain't pure, and they're not nice and clean. But do they really? Does that distinction matter? I guess.
I mean, if you want my honest opinion, and like not to bum you out more, no, no, it doesn't matter. Like um, you know, everything evolves as incremental step changes to things in the past, right? It was always going to be an inevitability that every good idea you ever had, like someone
Yep.
else was probably having it at the same time, right?
Or
And
before.
like,
Yep.
or before, yeah. And that's because like the frontier is like it is a fixed thing, right? It is a like, everybody that wants to be at the frontier will be at the frontier, right?
Yeah, the frontier doesn't like the thing is you can reach the front line very quickly,
Yeah,
and once you're there, there are millions of people there. So the chance that you find something novel is near zero.
right.
Um,
But then the challenge of real software is like just having the new cool gadget is like fine, but it doesn't actually solve a lot of the like harder problems of building big systems, right?
right, and it doesn't even touch on things like equity management or economic coordination.
Mhm.
Um,
I do think that one of the things that I thought while I was watching that video about MCP is it's cool that you could get agents to like pull things from your file system, like push them around, poke at them with other agents, with search
mm,
APIs, whatever, right? And then put things
mm,
back on your hard drive. I still wouldn't want to ask that thing to do banking for me, right? Because like the reason why blockchain happened in the first place is because it's, um, I think, let me back up a little tiny bit here.
yeah,
I have been working an awful lot with like a complicated system recently that needs to be spun up in a billion different environments. It's run in a billion different ways. It has its own like module system, or it can be run in K8s, or it can be run locally on your machine in a bunch of Docker containers. And you know what you need to actually keep something like that coherent is like an absolutely incredible first class logging experience between all the components, especially as you've exploded out into like 800 microservices or whatever, right?
mm,
Logging on that system is still absolutely like an afterthought. It's a bolt on feature, right? It's like, okay, we can stick it here on the network agents between the microservices that are running. And that way, every single like bit of traffic that's going
right.
around the whole
So
inner
you're
network
sort of
is,
logging the bus or the fabric, as it were.
yeah,
Yeah.
But like, I think what history will prove about blockchain is that like if you made logging a very central concern, right? If you said that like no program can run but through a log,
Mm.
and that log is actually the thing that's doing the work, right?
The log is the butts.
Like it's yeah, you are not capable of building a piece of software that does not log every single bit of internal like process, right? And that's
So
you know
basically, at what point does maintaining the complete application state at every meaningful interval become less work and data than the logging? And I'd argue it's pretty soon, like it's pretty early on, that
you know,
advantage kicks in.
and not only that, like now you've written a piece of software that you can ask to do your banking for you, right? Like this is something that has like a level of recoverability, a level of like just impossible to screw with it kind of like
Yeah, and
construction.
the key element, the key software property that enables that is repeatable computing. That's the
Yes.
thing that makes it all happen. And as soon as you lose repeatability, which honestly, in Hello World, you can lose it within a few lines of that, and you'll it'll become such a nightmare to get it back. But if you manage to hold it from the start, then you can do all these magical things if you have repeatability.
Right. Because you're pushing, like, okay, the very first program you ever wrote is running in an impure way because it has to take IO, right? It has to
Yeah.
take things from a person and it has to give things to a person. And like that's a boundary that like you lose every purity that
Like
you've
your,
ever
your
like,
your first experience is impure.
yeah. So like it's a worthwhile experiment to try and build systems that are resilient, repeatable, like that basically the log is the interface into the program
Right. And
rather than an afterthought.
yeah, and something that I've grown quite attached to is this ability to have it be Git compatible,
Hmm.
not because of the immutability properties of Git, but simply the compatibility. Because like I can it seems like what I really wanted, now that I've sort of, spent a lot of time trying to get the things I want, um, it wasn't just it was self sovereignty of data and
Hmm.
a level of understandability of what went on. And if I have a Git repo that represents my data and how it got there,
Hmm.
feel significantly safer that I'm never going to be locked in. Like, even having my data on the Ethereum chain, even while that thing is in full operation, I don't feel like I can really touch it because it's a bunch of freaking binary hex registers that I have to actually. I'm like, where is my stuff? And it costs like $1,000 a meg, or sorry, kilobyte even. And I'm like, that's not. It's sort of what I wanted, but it doesn't have the portability. You know,
Well, it has a bonkers assumption built into it, right? Which is that like we all have to be cooperating in one compute space together. Like
right,
that's
right. And so I guess the multiple chains concept,
mhm.
I don't think that's really run its course yet. So that's still valuable to push. But I'm just like, why would
Well,
anyone care about it? Is kind of what I'm starting to ask, because there's all these things that are ticking the boxes of more and more of the features that was gonna unlock. Um,
yeah, okay. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I've been there too, right? Like what's the value of any tool, right? Is what you can build with it. And like I tend to view all these things as tools, right? I mean, even AI itself, right? I think that like it's great. It makes me a little bit sad that some people are like already using it as like a wedge to try and like displace workers again, like everything
yeah,
new that
but
ever comes out.
that's as old as the hills. I mean, even blockchain was meant to displace workers. It was not for just putting people out of work or making them worthless, but simply to allow them to move on to more elevated pursuits
Yeah,
rather than things that are just. humans have within them something magical, which is that you can say shit that's never been said before. And
Mhm.
LLM, as far as I can see, no matter how you improve that architecture, it still lacks the spark of novelty. It's an unnovel machine that can appear novel because it drew on the novelty of other humans, um,
Mhm.
or it allowed you to it told you something that you've never heard of, and you're like, oh, that's brilliant. But actually, like, if you took the sum of all human knowledge, it's,
Well, it is pretty magical, right? When you're like, wow, I just built this thing in a language I never used before, or like
yeah,
I learned how this like
yeah,
tool I
yeah, yeah,
thought was
yeah.
impossible worked.
So
It,
part of what I see my job as, or my
Mhm.
duty as, is to also keep steering in a way that accommodates the latest developments in the technical sector as well. I'm not saying that I've seen enough signals to quit, but I am saying that I'm seeing signals that indicate a corrective movement is coming for the Dreamcatcher, and how we go about it. And so, how much time have we got, by the way? Because I can sort of like reduce my output tokens to accommodate. Um,
I have like 30 more minutes
30
probably.
more
So
minutes. Okie dokie.
yeah,
All right. So, O1 full just came out,
I saw
and
that.
I love it. Chat GPT Pro came out,
Yeah,
and I've been using that all day today, and it's starting to give me the feeling that um, for a time, the best AI is going to be non-repeatable and closed source. But then there's going to come a time when, like, if I was being generous, I'd say 2 years, and there'll be open source models that can do what ChatGPT Pro can do right now. And
yeah.
an open source model means you can run it on chain. But for the meantime, um, you got to just eat shit and just take the private option. So there's not
Mhm.
really a good selling point um, for a repeatable system, but there will be soon. So that's one area, right? The second area appears to be that what all this chat based interaction did was it changed very discreetly how a person interacts with an application of any kind, because a traditional web app is like, here's all your tools, paint, artist, paint, and you can go from here to there to there to there. Like, if you were watching a typical user use an app, you need to have an incredible amount of understanding of that app to know what they were trying to do, because the interface, it's used imperatively, like the user is implying what they're trying to do. But a chat-based interface makes it suddenly be declarative. It makes
Mhm.
it be discrete tasks. Like, first of all, you got a concept of a chat, so you typically want to achieve a single thing in that chat, but
Yeah.
also you can segment that chat into different objectives or tasks, and it's pretty obvious when the person has changed, right? But you don't get that with a traditional system. And so why that's a big deal is because you can put a fix me button on the current task that you can't put in a traditional app, because the fix me button in a chat based interface can capture exactly what they were trying to do in that discrete unit, and
Yeah.
it can sort of give them an output that would have been sufficient in that area, but you can't digitize or package up faults in a traditional user interface in that way, because it doesn't package, it doesn't unit well. um,
Yeah. I mean, the way I tend to think of that is it's not serialized, right? Like the thing that's going on inside the model in the memory in the
it
traditional
forced
application is
serialization, right? It forced
yeah,
serialization, which is a
yeah.
brilliant thing as a side effect, because it makes the program simpler.
Hmm.
It just so happens that
It's
it's magic.
to me arguably it's the reason why people like things like microservice architecture or like want to build more network based apps, right? It's because it's another like forced serialization.
Forced
Yeah.
serialization. Yeah, 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 yeah. So if I take that, and then I take the fact that where the AI models are going, and that they're getting incredibly powerful,
Yeah.
um, we're starting to use O1 as the reasoner. So like
Hmm.
we level up one and sort of try to talk to it about what should we do and why should we do it, as opposed to like what's the weather in San Francisco. Like we've gone well past like the gimmicky chatbot thing to like
Hmm.
tell me how to live my life, please. Um, and so yeah, I guess I'm saying, well, what what should I
What to
do?
do? What
What
to do now? Yeah.
what should I do?
So I mean, I want to go back to something that you said. I think you said that humans are the ones that have the spark, right?
The spot. Yeah,
And I think what you've always said to me about a dream catcher is like what if there was a net that could catch all those sparks,
yeah. I want to
basically.
catch the sparks. Yeah, because they're very fleeting, they're very faint, and they often arrive quite muddied, like a dirty spark plug, in amongst a
Yeah.
bunch of other stuff. But they're still there, and they die when they don't get connected to other sparks. And there's no
Hmm.
such social network right now that tries to develop the sparkle inside of the people, to sort of let people make more stuff with less. I forget what it's called. It's like the low pass filter, or there's this actually massive filter that kills new things because
Hmm.
of all the conditions that you to break the energy gap, to like here's a product from like
Right.
I had this idea in the pub and I was thinking it was cool, and like the gap is so big that most things die, and if we can just lower the energy gap down.
I like the metaphor. I really do. And what I would say is like AI, blockchains, like whatever you want to throw at that, like it doesn't matter if you want to ditch some of the things that you like feel are weight right now, right? If you wanted to write this on MCP and you felt that like that's a good approach and it would save
Like
you a lot of time, I think you should.
an AI on a blockchain connected to MCP and just YOLO it.
Or maybe don't even think about blockchain for now, like because I think the thing is like
Blockchain's
maybe where it's all kind of running in circles is you want you want the application that you're building to shrink the gap, right?
yeah.
Doesn't that mean it's your job to understand what the gap is and to model it? Like maybe
I
maybe
agree with
thinking,
you, but the issue is I feel like I do, and so
okay,
it'd be great if you told me how I don't. Um,
if I told you how you don't, I mean I don't know, right? I get lost in this question a lot myself. It's like, okay, I have ideas. Angela has ideas. We talk about ideas all the time. It would be awesome if any of those were immediately actionable. You know, if I could go out there and Angela tends to have the type of ideas that are like require you to have like a full blown authenticate and authorize any person on the planet like to a very high degree of certainty that they're a person like that's it basically impossible to build that kind of authorization system, you know.
right, but
um,
there's great value in being able to say like if I had this component, then I
mhm,
could blah blah blah. Like if I had a
right.
quantum computer, then things would be really cool. And then one day your requirements will be met and suddenly you're off. Um,
So I would argue that like what you're saying there is that you like the way people could serve that goal the best is by like figuring out how to attach their ideas into a context even if they don't know how to action them, right?
yeah,
Like how
like
to
yeah, and have like automated deduplication going on so that we're like, oh, all of us need this one piece. Oh, well, we didn't know that before, and now that means that one piece is actually quite more useful because the guy who knows how to use it didn't think it was worth much because he could only imagine how it was going to do this one thing. But actually, there's a lot of things that need it.
Sure, I'm with you. I think that um, again, I brought up that example of the conversation I have with Angela because I don't know how to build that thing. I'd love to be able to get somebody to just be like, auth is easy, right? Like it's just a bunch of like crypto functions, and
Mm,
like I could spend all my time trying to figure those out, and then I'm not actually doing the thing that I want to do, which is build the application that's supposed to be on top of that, right? So
right.
like for me to be able to go out and like say this is the part I don't know that I wish somebody else could just deliver to me, and this is the part I do know and I want to build, like that's great. I'd love that. I'd
Right.
love that.
But the thing that seems crucial to all of that is the attribution system,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what is actually the biggest killer. The killer filter is how am I going to get paid, and someone's going to steal my idea, or someone's going to get the credit, and then that's what kills anything happening at all.
Yeah, I've money is a tricky thing. I have a lot of like maybe you're kind of coming at me at a moment where I've been reading stuff online a lot recently that's been making me mad. Uh, I think we're about to head out to look at like large chunks of land
Hmm.
all over the country that we could buy, and like I believe that there's probably some value to knowing how to do homesteading type stuff in
Oh,
the near
absolutely.
future, just ba-
Absolutely.
just based on my pessimism about the world, right?
Yep.
Um, and I keep thinking about in that environment, in that world, where like all of a sudden, you can't really trust the structures that are around you anymore, that
Yep.
are all based on that idea of like how do I contribute in a monetary way to this system, right?
Hmm.
Um, that like I actually personally deeply believe that like the true value of things you can do in life probably aren't monetary, right? Like I think people all kind of crave community, and they all crave like experiences that they enjoy and like take pleasure in,
Yeah,
and they
I'd agree with you, except with the caveat that it's simply because the monetary system has not been designed in such a way that those things can be aligned. And my belief is that they can be made to be the same thing. Like, why should what I emotionally value not be also valued by other people? And why? How many smiles does a bar of gold buy? Like, those are trades that should be possible, but the money system kills it, right?
okay, yeah, I'm
Like,
with
like,
you.
like, like, for example, what is the benefit in me reducing my carbon output for the proven benefit of someone 200 years in the future? Right now, they ain't even gonna remember me. They'll have my fucking life Facebook feed in some fucking archive, etched on the tip of a diamond that no one will ever fucking look at because they got bigger problems like, the seas dried up, and like they got other problems, right? And so I'm like, maybe I'll just burn the carbon. Like, maybe screw you. Maybe, like, what's the difference? But a system should be in place where that can carry forwards and have some long lasting benefit to the things that I chose to leave behind and care about, like children, for example. So if you're like the great great grandfather of someone who walked to work instead of driving his V8, you should get a proportionate sort of a thing there, right? Like,
I'm actually with you. I think like that's the marketing problem of the idea that you're trying to put out in the world is how do you teach other people to think that like this is how we should construct value when they're so bought into the way that we do construct value right now, which
but
is
they're not that, yeah, but they're not bought into it. They go along with it and they perpetuate it because it's death to do so, but they grumble and they moan and they listen to Rage Against the Machine or whatever the cool kids do now all the way along. and very few people have a shot at it. But I'm just sort of saying that now that we have AI, one of the key features of AI is that it's not that it's incorruptible, it's just that it is repeatable. And it can do intelligent decisions that may not be perfect, but at least they'll be not human corruptible, not biased. You know,
It's it's ultimately kind of like you made the wisdom of the crowd queryable, right?
yeah, the wisdom of the crowds, right? So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is I've lost sight of all these components seem less and less magical. Like a year ago, they all felt like really high quality components. I was like, yeah, we'll make this thing and we'll make these bits and I'll assemble and it'll be the Dreamcatcher, like Voltron, sort of. But now I'm like, it's muddier. It's less.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, I think this is just a challenge in the entire domain of software. Honestly, I like you know the more you fall in love with your architecture, the usually typically the worse the architecture actually is. I don't you know the more time you spend trying to like polish all the like bits and pieces, the more time you lose to actually put to the problem that you're trying to solve, right?
Yeah, I would argue like I've dumped the architecture so many times that I'm pretty sure I've proven I'm not attached to the architecture. I guess it's more like I'm attached to what I want it to do.
Yeah,
And I'm
and I
still
think
not getting that outside of building it ourselves. I'm still not getting the portability and the repeatability and the scale. And so I'm like, is that enough reason to keep going with it? Or should I just park those and focus on the core thing I want, which is this ambient coordination or an attribution system, a coordination system that's economically tied, that's just hanging around in the ether, grinding away with AI tokens, trying to make links between people and statements and things, like the basal layer of an awareness machine that's actually like plugged into every single person and sort of ambiently.
yeah. So I mean, I guess I got to back up a little bit. I think like it is still the case that the thing that you're proposing is massive, right? It's like it's hard, it's very difficult, and it's very like if it has even the mildest amount of success and like brings people, a little bit more value to their lives, like a little bit more value in the form of real money, like there will be immediately tons of people trying to corrupt it. So like
Yeah,
there's a lot of good reasons to think about the architecture. There's a lot of good reasons to really
yeah,
care about
right.
how
Because
it's built.
I'm like, for it to take a little bit of load is the same amount of effort as it to take a lot of load. Because it's like
Right,
it needs to be immutable, like not like a little bit immutable, but like actually immutable.
right. But like nothing is lost either, right? Everything that you've built like gives you the foundation to understand the way that other people have built similar things, and like you can look at them after all the work that you've done and you can see how they function, and like to even be sitting here saying, I've seen enough things that work similarly to how the things I've built work, that I'm starting to feel that they're losing their luster. You wouldn't even be able to make that assessment if you hadn't gone through the work of trying to build it yourself.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
fair.
like,
That's okay. That's used. That's I can see that, but not to be facetious, but how does that help me?
but it allows you to take your ego one more piece out of the game, right? Like I don't think you have. Look, I don't think of you as a person who's like ego driven in any of this, right? But like ego is something that trips me up all the time, and so I'm just speaking from my own experience, trying to,
Right, right, right. So I
you
guess
know,
to refocus on the objective,
yeah,
how do we make this economic coordination network? I don't particularly care how. I just like it feels like it's something that needs to exist, and I
right.
just can't seem to. I'd like it to exist without sooner than the rate at which we're going, because it's it's always kind of half here, but it's
Mhm.
never actually here at the same time. So
But I would argue that if you don't care about how, then the only other thing that remains is what. Like you just have to like have a very clear description of how it's
of
like
what?
of what it's supposed to do, and like if all you can do is like take that what and like look at little pieces of it, everybody's got their own like corner of the elephant, and it's hard to tell that it's an elephant. if
That's
all
right.
you can do is just if all you can do is just like look at that little piece that's in front of you with this tool that you have and like put it into the pile of like what's that I've described all around the problem, like eventually I would argue that you would have sufficiently described the intent and like the what of it all to the point that like it's possible for other people to come look at it and also
Okay,
because
okay.
the thing
So,
is.
perhaps the light I could take from this is that with all the torture and the turmoil, I can at least say that I have seen enough in the world that I can say what the Dreamcatcher is,
Mhm,
because up till now we had different theories and we had to build some things and try some things to realize
mhm,
why different bits don't work and what does work. But
mhm.
actually, what's happened now is we should be able to reason about what it actually is as a statement or a requirements document or an RFC document, and be like, this thing needs to be here now, and it has these component dependencies, and then
Yeah,
right.
right, right. So I mean, just get writing the test cases of what it's meant to be doing, like or the RFC or whatever, like however you want to package it. Like you've done enough experiments now. You can start to pick up the experiments, and you can write out like the what. And an intelligent what is going to always give your motivation, right? It's always going to also teach the people who are reading the what why that what matters. um, and you can attach a how, and you can say this is not the only how, and this is
Yeah,
just this tiny piece of the thing.
yeah, there seems to
And
be like there's a lot of ways that you could build the Dreamcatcher, but they do seem to share a bunch of properties, to do with immutability, repeatability, cost of execution, um, portability of data, all those that they all, like, any implementation has to follow those kind of steps, and then after that you step into the realm of specifics. Like naps is like a specific thing that we're like, okay, now we're going to make some choices that aren't compatible with other similar systems because we have to get these extra features. Like this is, like TCP/IP, you got to make some trade-offs. You're like, okay, we're going to define a packet now, and it's reliable, and that means it's not UDP anymore. So,
mhm.
like, yeah, okay,
So and I know you've been doing that too, right? You've been putting stuff onto the site. You've been like building the kind of catalog of
we got some
how.
great techniques, mostly because of what Scott's come up with, which is how to actually get the bots to reason about systems, and how to be able to update the definitions of a system just by having a conversation with someone else who knows about it, and then taking the transcript and using a bot to like massage it through all the definitions. that's
Mhm.
that's showing some great yield. But
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
again,
It's
that's
again.
one of those things that's like we hit all these things that are valuable. It's like it's just I guess my fear, right, is I'm like, I know this thing, the Dreamcatcher, is possible. I know it's possible, but it's sort of like knowing that you can factor prime numbers. So many useful things came from people trying to do that thing because they're like, oh, I need to factor prime numbers. And then they make like side effecty stuff to help them. And it turns out the side effect stuff is the useful bit.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, right?
yeah. So let me ask you this. I think at the end of the day, like the utility that you're looking for from everything that you describe requires like a large amount of buy-in from a large amount of people, right?
Right.
Like it's going to be the thing that shrinks that band gap is the amount of other people that are using the system, right? The amount that like it takes a very little amount of energy for me to lob this idea up into the overall system and
Yeah,
get it crossed over
yeah, right. And the extreme
somewhere
case
where
is if there's only one person in the system, then the energy gap is the same as the rest of the world. But
exactly,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
So like, one of the things that you need to do in order to make this happen, and I would honestly argue that like you probably your instinct that the code doesn't really matter. Like first of all, that was a really hard lesson for me to learn in my life.
right.
That code is basically irrelevant.
Yeah,
Um, um, that took years and years and years of like very painful deprogramming from my own career, and
yeah. I'll tell you
like
what does last though: reasons.
yeah,
So that's what we discovered with reasoning is these definitions. It kind of doesn't matter how good an intelligence gets. A collection of reasons are always
mhm,
going to be like they're gonna outlast everything. They are the project. You know,
right. Code is how, like your spec is what, and even what doesn't really matter that much, right? Like it's the why
why?
you're doing it.
Why? Yeah, why? That's the thing. And so we've even started poking at the notion of having some very simple mathematical expressions of the efficiency of communism, socialism, capitalism, and dream ambientism, as the bots like to call it, and saying like, this is why like there's an economic coordination system that we can put in place that is vastly superior in a large number of use cases. And so, yeah, putting down the why, I think is. I think what you're saying to me is that that's actually of vital importance. It's more important than getting a working prototype up, is to
Well,
have
so
it.
you need to what and why need to come together, right? Because like anyone can talk about why they want things to change or why they want things to be better, but like you also have to deliver like a what, saying this is what I'm going to do to change it, right?
So like so
I
right,
think
so
that's
like a why, and then a here's a what that will solve the why.
yeah.
Yeah,
And then the how just becomes an implementation detail. It just
right. And
becomes like
that's
a
the thing you're saying, like, because it's code, it's throwaway, it doesn't really matter. There's lots of other options and all that.
yeah.
I felt like you had another point after you were going to say, like, it took a lot of deprogramming for you to recognize that the code was nothing.
Right. This is we were talking about it, right? Like you clued into it, you picked up on it.
All right.
The thing I was ultimately trying to say, like I'm in the middle of like at my job right now. I'm in the middle of taking something that was massively over engineered, and it was somebody did it with like a profound love of this way of writing code, and and like they lived inside that love, and nobody used the thing that they built. No customers ever used it, and it languished on the shelf. And then they stopped presenting it as a thing for customers. And now it's being picked up, and it's assumed that this thing works perfectly well because somebody puts it was such a labor of love for them, right? And like the problem is, I go in there and I just don't understand what it's for. I don't understand how it works. Like I don't understand and the reason I don't understand is because like nobody ever wrote down why they want it in the first place. Like
Well, one
they
of the things that we're hopeful of is that by using the bots to reason very thoroughly about the top level, the
mm-hmm.
top level stuff, it seems to give them a great shot at writing the code correctly because they understand why. And they are also, the bots are in charge of the modularity boundaries, because that's another thing that's important to pick is like, where's the edge of this system versus that system? And once you got that all down, the bots seem to be hitting it pretty damn good for how to write the code, right? And it's like they write code that would take me literally weeks in like under a minute, and I'm like, I know it's not right, but it also isn't wrong, and it's probably my reasoning higher up that caused the fault. I guess
Yeah,
that's kind of where we're hovering.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's something that I've seen coming for a long time. With there's a lot of developer buy-in into like I got to learn how to use AI because I otherwise it'll replace me. But the thing is, like No, it's the system design itself that's actually hard in
That's
programming,
actually
right?
really hard, and it takes a lot of time. It takes a huge amount of thinking and humility to be like, oh, maybe I didn't care about that bit, or maybe it's the same as this other thing. So
Yeah.
I think what I'm taking away from this is that I should double down on the reasoning stuff with Scott so that we
Hmm.
can actually do that sort of look down ability. Like that's the best chance of landing the Dreamcatcher is to have a well reasoned why and a what, and then implementation becomes falling down rather than like lifting up as we're trying to. We were trying to implement our way to a requirements doc. We were trying to futz around and then be like ta-da, and then write the docs after because you know
Well, it's the eternal trap, isn't it? If I just build enough stuff, like maybe I'll understand what it's for.
Yeah, well, this is that's, like we were never dishonest about that. We don't really understand what the like. We can only see a little bit ahead of us, but we may be able to see the whole thing now. Yeah.
I
Okay.
think so.
All right.
So, so the other thing too is, well, I mean, I guess anything that would get you to the point of being able to like turn describing the system into your main job is. Oh, sorry. Here's the other thing I was thinking. Maybe learning a few lessons from like science, right? Is
Hmm.
like if you want people to really take seriously the idea that this could be better at allocating resources and better at like better as an economic engine than whatever we
Yeah.
have right now,
Yeah. An
like
economic engine.
make some repeatable experiments that other like academics can actually take seriously, and then when they repeat the experiments, like they will be bought in,
You
they
mean
will
like a,
believe.
a simulated experiment where I can make a model of rational actors in an economic virtual environment, or do you mean like some real world?
Either one works, right? These both techniques are things that economists use. Economists love like rational actor models, even though they know people aren't
Yeah.
rational.
Can you give me
um,
an example of what an experiment, a repeatable experiment, might be?
yeah, so the classic one that I've read about is you do the I can't remember it. You make a little tiny world, and then you make actors inside this world, and then you make like an uneven allocation of resources in the world.
Right.
And like this is a computational simulation, right? So like then you make some people be born on top of the giant pile of spice,
Right,
and you
right.
make
Where your respawn was, your
yeah,
respawn
yeah,
point can dictate the whole game. And you're like, is it fair that you can respawn in a place that you can never be, you can never make it out of this barrier? Like,
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and then you make some people be born on top of the giant pile of gold, right? And then you make some people be born out way in the wasteland where they don't have either spice or gold. And then you just watch. You watch the allocation of spice, you watch the allocation of gold among the actors. You watch the trade networks form. You give them like simple kind of finite state machine kind of operations like trading spice for gold at whatever the trade rate that
like
they
an
find is
API,
acceptable.
basically a
Yeah,
marketplace API.
yeah, and you make each of them have their own beliefs about what is the right value of spice and what is the right value of gold, and then you monitor all the actors inside the network, and you'll see that wealth inequality emerges on even the simplest possible economic model. Wealth inequality emerges.
Okay.
I'll
Um,
see if I can find. I'll see if I can find the paper again that one came from. It's in a book I need to dig out. But like
hmm,
let's say you have the ability to like seriously cast doubt on like the market model, the trade model between these actors, these agents in that network,
yeah.
uh, um, using the economic model that you're proposing. Like that's the type of thing that if you got a real economist to enter that as a real econ paper into a journal, you will drive serious academic interest in the thing that you're doing.
Okay. And I'm starting to feel like, call me ballsy, but I'm starting to feel like with ChatGPT Pro and maybe like the version from a year from now, I feel like
Mhm.
I can almost write a reputable white paper almost with
Okay.
with a little bit of feedback and whatever. But I guess it is really the economic model that I care about. I don't particularly care how it gets implemented. Um, okay, that's a good
And
strategy.
pick the real bugbears of the world right now, right? Like wealth inequality is, I think,
Hmm.
we're
So okay, so
basically
I'll tell you what.
we're basically in the Gilded Age.
I'll tell you what. What if I so part of this reasoning thing is that we can
Mm-hmm.
take the reasoning and we can make a bot. So you can put this bot
Mm-hmm.
on the website, and people who talk about the Dreamcatcher always come up with a story. They ask the question in a way of, so if I have 5 gold and 2 horses and a bright idea, blah blah blah. Like it's always that. And so this bot can
Okay.
answer those questions all day long very well, right? That
Mm-hmm.
bot can also generate, with a bit of guidance, a white paper or a statement of what it's about and how it compares and blah blah blah. So, but then if we could make it so that this tool, you could chat to it about an economic scenario that you wanted to set up, and then run the simulator after just chatting up a scenario, that
Mm-hmm.
sounds like something that's quite that's like a great pitch, because you're like, this is why we should build this thing, people. And then we can not only model out our far away things, but every time we have problems in the Dreamcatcher, we can
Mm-hmm.
turn to the simulator and sim out the state of where things are. So yeah, okay, maybe I'll think about that one.
Yeah, I think that's a cool, like, being able to know the effect of the thing that you're doing would, like, before you even start doing it, would be really useful
Yeah,
for anybody
yeah,
building it.
not as a completely decoupled, distinct thing. It's like part of the machine itself is this simulator that everyone has, and it's like it's always with you as much as you want to pay for. That sort of attempts to forecast the future based on where the present is and the rules of the game, and you can propose things to it. That's kind of the key. So yeah, okay, I'll have a think about that. Okay. Let you go then.
Sorry?
I should let you go. You said you
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Sorry, I haven't had dinner yet.
okay.
Um,
Oh dear.
but yeah, it's good to talk.
Yeah. Um, so naps, I should only really pursue naps insofar as once we define the top level definition. If the naps fall out of that, that's the only reason to pursue naps. Even though I think naps is a great idea on its own,
Yeah,
but um,
I mean, I like the idea. I like all the ideas that you ever propose, but like some certain subset of those ideas is going to be the right ones to, like,
yeah,
try not to grab more things than you can hold when
yeah,
you're moving forward, trying to, like, get adoption from people, right?
yeah,
Because, like, there'll come a point where it can get complicated and it can have all the little bits inside of it, because there's enough people that are, like, taking ownership over those bits and making sure that
yeah.
they
I
work
think
right.
the reason why I really like naps for the Dreamcatcher is because the ability to package up or turn into a unit economic
Mhm.
value is very important, because otherwise, if it's kind of diffused about the place, it's hard to really say that guy did that thing or that other guy, like, but
Yeah,
naps make it unitable in the same
yeah,
way as the serializable. It's basically naps let you serialize the value stream into
right,
like discrete chunks that you can then figure out which one weighs more and who.
right.
Right, that's I guess what I was
Yeah,
seeing.
you'll need something like that regardless, right,
Yeah,
for
you got it
attribution
right.
to work, because, like, you
It's
need,
fuzzy.
like, you can attribute all you want, but you need something to point at, right?
You need units. You need units.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
All right.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry I'm a little bit fuzzy here, but
No,
yeah, it's
it's all
just
good.
I think it's part of the making sure we are still relevant in these changing times. Um,
Yeah. Well, like, you are for sure. Like, I definitely talk to a lot of people in this industry, and I, like, definitely don't see a lot of them as like, frontier as you. So don't worry about it too much.
all right.
You're a smart guy. You're a smart guy, and you obviously always worked on things because they're valuable.
I think this is immensely valuable. But yeah, thank you very much. I'll talk to Scott. We'll go over this recording, and then it sounds like what we'll end up doing is focusing on the economic model primarily.
I, yeah, I think like the other thing I'm trying to get across here is like couch it in the language that like the serious people like speak, right? Because if you can't convince the serious people like to buy into it,
Mm.
it's gonna. You can always convince like maniacs to buy into things, right?
Oh yeah, the crypto industry is daily proof of that one. So yeah, yeah, okay,
but if you want it to be a place where like new ideas can seriously attach themselves to old ideas, and I think that's something that's sorely needed in the world.
yep,
Um, they talk about the crisis in physics all the time now, right? It's because there's too many people that are like the big people that are pushing their individual theories that like nobody feels like they're allowed to just come up with crazy weird ideas anymore,
right, yeah,
right?
you're right, right.
And like I think that's starting to happen to just everybody. There's a feeling of like
Yeah, and it's
oppression
almost like a
oppression of idea.
communication suppression. Like you
Yeah,
can't even start to say a crazy idea because you'll get clamped down by the environment, and so the other person who needed to hear your crazy idea to make it less crazy never gets the message,
yeah,
and
right.
that's a problem.
Yes, but it's because everything's like there's too many orthodoxies, right? There's too many like I think there's too many pre-existing structures that have accumulated so much. They're so imminent. They're so fucking heavy in everything, right? That like you always feel like you're living in a cage with everything that you're doing.
Right. Even like you can't even really say what you think because you might get in trouble for it. And when I was growing up, that was sort of like promised to us as something that was valuable, like free speech. You should be able to say what you want. Obviously with some limitations, but now it's like you can't even say anything. Like
I suspect that part of it is a signal and noise problem. Like there's just too many people talking for like you know there's just not that many people listening. Everybody's too busy talking. But anyway,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think anyway, I should actually hop off for sure.
Okay. Well,
It's
good,
good to
buddy.
talk.
Thank you very much for your time. I always appreciate our
Yeah,
talks. I'll
yeah,
I'll let you know how we get on.
yeah, for sure. Good
Okay.
one. Bye.
Peace.